I like the subject as it gives me more knowledge about the universe and the way it works, which is why I'm very interested in learning more and more. Even if I don't take it um, seriously in the future, I would still love to read about it.
And where are you from, Sarah? Where are you currently residing? Hello? Sarah, you are mute if you are speaking.
I am from Bahrain.
Okay. So you have not decided whether you want to take biology further or not, but you like the subject, right? What do you find difficult in the subject? Anything that you do not like in the subject or you find difficult?
Breaking down the scientific names
Yes.
is a little hard.
Words, right? So yes, the terminology of biology is sometimes very, very tedious, and that's what weighs down the subject and makes it boring for some people. I also faced the similar difficulty when I started studying biology as a subject, but I realized that these problems can be tackled. And as you said, it's a very beautiful subject that tells us about our own selves, about the living system in general, because it's the study of life, right? So whatever profession you take up in future, biology is going to make you more aware about your own self and about the living world you are a part of. Okay. Okay. Well, cool. So I think we have everyone is joined. Okay, Aisha and Nida. Any doubts? Because so this is the second class. We have had one class for this batch, and in which we just discussed the basics. Okay, Sarah. So this is for you. So we'll start with some brief recap of the last class, and then we'll start building on in this batch. Okay. So who would like to give a brief uh, recap? Nida, can you speak? Are you there? Am I audible to you, Nida?
Yes.
Yes. Would you like to recap to Sarah about what we did in the last class? And
Yes.
are you fine?
So we
Is your throat fine?
I know I have throat pain.
Then okay. Then I exempt you from this punishment. Okay, you relax, because you will be needing your voice to discuss. So I still expect some discussion. And yes, Aisha has already unmuted herself. Come on, Aisha.
So first, as the chapter is about reproduction, so first we learn what is reproduction. So basically, it is the process by which organisms produces offspring, which are similar to their parents in the adult form. And then the reproduction is of two types. One is asexual, and the second one is sexual. Basically, in asexual, only one parent, or we can say only one sex is involved. And yeah, in asexual reproduction, like uh, uh in asexual reproduction, there is no gamete formation, and and okay,
Okay.
no, there is gamete form. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Again,
There
I'm
may
sorry.
or may not be gamete formation
Yeah,
happening, because yes.
yeah, I'm sorry. And there may or may not happen. Basically, we can say gametogenesis, and then
Because see, the point here is that gamete has nothing to do with the asexual mode of reproduction.
yeah,
So
okay, fine.
yes. So even organisms that produce gametes, they can undergo asexual reproduction with gametogenesis happening in their body, which they are not using for sexually reproduction modes. Like plants. Plants may be forming gametes in their system, but they can also propagate vegetatively, which is a part of asexual reproduction. Is it clear? That's why gametogenesis may or may not happen. It's not an important part. What is the more important thing, Aisha?
The most important thing.
What should not happen?
What should not happen?
Strictly. If that happens, then it is no more as asexual reproduction.
Two parents.
Gamete fusion,
Yeah.
fertilization. Till the time you are not doing fertilization, any system, if it is not fusing two gametes, it is not doing sexual reproduction. Simple. Even if they are producing anything, regardless of the fact that even if they are producing seeds or embryos. So I'll be telling you about this later on in sexual reproduction, that you can even form seeds and embryos without sexually reproducing, but that still is called asexual reproduction. So Sarah, you are understanding?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, continue, Aisha.
And what we are saying is in a sexual reproduction,
Your voice is breaking, Aisha.
reproduction,
Your voice is breaking, Aisha. Okay, so let me take from here. So basically, Sarah, what we did in the last class is, Aisha has already told you till the asexual mode. So we started with reproduction. And as you know that the word reproduction, and before I go forward, let me also tell you one thing, because you also mentioned that you find words sometimes difficult in biology. And for that, uh, I realized this very early when I was studying biology. So I do this for all my students, that we will be studying biology, the how part, basically, which are the concepts through discussions. And we will be trying to understand the what part through the words that are used in biology. Okay. So I will ask you to make a mini dictionary for yourself, which we will be creating throughout the classes. Okay. So you can leave first 2-3 pages of your notebook that you will make for biology blank, where you will be writing certain words and their meanings that are used in biological contexts everywhere, and wherever they are used, they means the same thing or similar things. Is it okay, Sarah? You understand?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we started with discussing asexual mode of reproduction, where the main highlights is that only one parent or one sex is involved, and gametogenesis may or may not happen, and that does not matter if there are gametes in that organism's body present or not. But gamete fusion should not happen. That is the criteria. Unless and until you are avoiding gamete fusion, you are in the asexual mode of reproduction. And the offsprings which are produced, they are basically biological clones of their parents and their siblings. So everything that is produced through a asexual mode is biologically like a photocopy. So there is no genetic variation. Okay, understood? It's clear, right? It's simple.
Yes.
We also discussed hermaphrodites. So you might like to note certain things down, keep noting certain points, and you can go back and read these from NCRT. And if you have, because these are the basics, if you have any problem, you can come up with questions, and I take questions before I start the class and after I end the class. Okay, so no problem with that. We also discussed hermaphrodites. Now hermaphrodites are those organisms where both the sexes or both types of gametes are present in the same body. Okay, an example of hermaphrodite organism is earthworm. Yes, Aisha, you are back, but your voice is still breaking, so I have taken over. Okay, I'll explain. Don't worry. So earthworm is a hermaphrodite organism, and talking about uh, asexual modes, we will start from the simplest of the organisms, which are unicellular organisms. Now, in unicellular organisms, there is only asexual mode that is possible, and it's obvious because for sexual mode to happen, we need gametes, right? And gametes themselves are unicellular entities. Correct, Sarah?
Yes.
And a unicellular organism, the only way it can produce another unicellular entity is by division. Okay, and when it divides, it itself is reproducing. So a bacteria, when it undergoes division, which is known as binary fission, in this case, it divides into two daughter cells. So the parent cell divides into two daughter cells. Therefore, in unicellular organisms, cell division itself is a mode of reproduction. Is it clear? So there can never be gametogenesis happening. So there can never be gamete fusion, and there can never be a sexual reproduction in unicellular organisms. So this is what I'm telling you now. You have to just understand this. There are ways through which even a unicellular organism can have genetic variation, but that we will take on later. First, the basics, okay? Second thing is that unicellular organisms have no concept of biological mortality. They do not die if we do not kill them. For example, look at this bacteria. So this is a bacteria. Can you see my cursor, Sarah, Nida, and Aisha?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes. If this is a bacteria and if it divides into two, then the parent cell itself becomes the daughter cell, correct? So technically, there is no parent cell now. And technically, if there is no parent cell in existence, it cannot die also. So every time a cell grows, it divides and becomes two daughter cells, and again start a life, starts growing, again divides. So it never dies on its own. So biologically, they are immortal unless and until we kill them, and we do kill bacteria on a regular basis to treat bacterial infections through antibiotics. Okay. So the first mode which we studied was binary fission. Binary means two, and fission means splitting. So binary, there is also something called multiple fission, and now you understand what does multiple fission means, right? So you will be able to do it from the NCERT, the definitions and stuff, right, Sarah? That's not a problem. Now, moving on to some more advanced or evolved organisms, we went on to discuss budding. Now, budding is where there is a parent cell over which a bud starts developing. So this bud starts as a small outgrowth which keeps growing, and after it reaches a size where it is now mature and capable of existing independently, it gets detached from the parent's body. Now here there is a parent cell and a daughter cell that was produced, daughter bud, from the daughter bud. Now through budding, the parent cell is still in existence, right? And it can die naturally. Correct? You understand? So organisms that undergo budding are basically mortal. They can die. Now budding can be a single bud could be there on the parent cell, or like here we discussed the example of a yeast. You know what is an yeast, Sarah, from class 11th?
Yes.
Yes, it is the first, it's a unicellular eukaryote, the simplest eukaryote, right? Mostly eukaryotes are multicellular, most of them, but this is a unicellular eukaryote. In a parent yeast, either there can be one bud at a time, or there can be a chain of buds, multiple buds at the same time. And the parent cell can give rise to multiple daughter buds through budding. Okay. Budding also happens in multicellular organisms like Hydra. So Hydra is a multicellular organism where a small bud starts developing as an outgrowth, then takes the shape of another Hydra, and when that daughter Hydra achieves maturity or a particular size, it gets detached, the same concept, and starts living independently, right? So budding can happen in both multicellular and unicellular. Is it clear? Any doubts, Sarah?
It's clear, yes.
Okay. So binary fission and budding. So fission and budding is clear. Now the third asexual mode is fragmentation. And as the name suggests, the word fragmentation means breaking into pieces. You have to make fragments. Now, when we talk about organisms, mostly organisms cannot fragment themselves on their own. Okay. So they have to depend on some external factor. Okay. So mostly an organism has to depend on one or the other external factor which fragments it in the first place. And after it gets fragmented, then each particular fragment will develop into a new individual. It will regrow the lost fragment. parts and become a new individual. So example here is Hydra, Planaria, Spirogyra, and Starfish, out of which Spirogyra sometimes shows the ability of self-fragmentation. So this can fragment itself. Okay, so self-fragmentation is shown by Spirogyra. For others, if they are trapped somewhere or if they are attacked by predators, because of which they are broken into pieces, then each fragment develops into a new hydra. And this remarkable capability is very, very explicit or elaborate in hydra. So, and it's so elaborate to an extent that if you take, let's say, 10 hydra and put it in a mixer grinder and make like a chutney out of it, you make thousands of small pieces of hydra, you understand, and then you put that all those 1,000 pieces on a substrate where they can get nutrition, what they are in water, then you will see thousands of new small hydras growing. Isn't it remarkable? So technically you cannot kill them by cutting them into pieces, you understand?
Yes.
Yes. So that's called fragmentation, where organism breaks down into pieces and then each piece develops into a new organism. And it is a mode of reproduction because we are producing copies, and it's asexual because all those copies are exactly the same. Okay. The last thing that we were discussing in yesterday's class that I will continue discussing today as well is regeneration. Now you must have heard of this term regeneration, everyone. Aisha, Nida, Sarah.
Yes.
Yes, Aisha, please. What is regeneration? Aisha. Yes.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, you're audible.
Regeneration, it is the ability to grow back from the lost body part,
Mhm.
and in some cases such as low organisms, it is the ability to grow back the whole organism from the lost body part.
Yes. So regeneration is in a very limited manner, you can call it a mode of reproduction. It is not a mode of reproduction for all the organisms alike, even those organisms which show regeneration. So like those organisms which show fragmentation will always can always reproduce through this mode. You understand the difference, everyone? Those organisms which show budding can always reproduce through this mode. They can always make copies. Is it clear? Same is with fission. But the organisms which show regeneration capability, all the time, all the organisms that show this capability might not reproduce from this through this mode. Is it clear? Am I clear? Like in case of a lizard, lizards also show the ability to regenerate. Now they can regenerate their tail back. You know that? There are salamanders and newts, they can regenerate even the limbs back, right? Yes or no? Yes, Sarah, you're saying something? You want?
Yes, the lizards can regenerate their tails.
Yes, but that capability to regenerate is limited to only certain organs. If I cut the tail of a lizard, that will be regenerated, right? So tail cut, it can regenerate, no problem. It can regenerate the tail. But if I cut the lizard from the half, like if I cut from the belly, dissecting the lizard into two parts, will the lizard be able to regenerate the lost part, or will the lizard be able to survive? Or if I cut the head,
No.
no, right? And even this tail regeneration that it does in this also, the bigger part, which is the organism itself, which lost the tail, can regenerate the tail back. But the tail part, which is also a tissue, cannot regenerate back the whole organism. Do you understand the difference between fragmentation and regeneration now? Yes?
Yes.
Now regeneration as a capability is obviously in like inclusive in fragmentation. Okay, so when we make fragments, then we can biologically what's happening is every fragment is regenerating back into a whole new organism. But when we talk about regeneration specifically, exclusive of fragmentation as an ability, it is not a true mode of reproduction. Do you understand why? Because lower organisms like Hydra can regenerate back from any given part the whole organism. But organisms like lizards, even human, you know that humans also have the capability to regenerate, but it is very, very limited. Yes. What can humans regenerate? Nida.
Tissues?
Cells.
What tissues? We cannot regenerate all the tissues. For example, we cannot regenerate our nervous tissues like the neurons, specifically in the brain, or we cannot regenerate back the muscles of our heart, which is an important organ. So any injury to the heart always stays there. So if something happened and due to something, some tissues in the heart got killed, they will always stay there throughout the life as a scar in humans. But in other organisms like zebrafish, I don't know if you know what is a zebrafish. It's a small freshwater fish which has stripes like a zebra. Anyone knows zebrafish?
Yes, sir.
It has stripes like this. That's why it's called a zebrafish. So they can regenerate their heart back. What can we regenerate back as organs? Sarah, what tissues were you talking about?
Skin tissues.
Skin tissues? Can we regenerate skin tissues to any extent? I understand why did you say that, because whenever we get a wound or a cut, it heals, right? If we were not,
Yes.
yes, if we were not able to regenerate our skin tissues, no wound would ever heal. Yes, skin tissues is one thing. We regenerate our nail all the time. You know that? Even if you take out
Yes,
that nail,
nails and
it can
hair.
be regenerated. It's regenerating all the time. Our hair follicles regenerate. And talking about the major organs in humans, liver show the capability to regenerate. So you can write down liver regenerate in humans. Aisha, you were saying something? Yes. What were you saying? You're not audible.
I wasn't saying anything, sir.
Okay. So you understood that regeneration is very, very limited in many organisms. So this question always comes in boards. Many a times I have seen this, that why regeneration is not considered a true mode of reproduction. So you can write down this question, note down this question. Why regeneration is not considered as a true mode of reproduction in biology. And the answer is regeneration is the ability, the capability to regrow lost body parts in most of the organisms. In most of the organisms. But they cannot regenerate back. They cannot regenerate back a whole organism from those lost body parts. From those lost body parts. This ability is only limited to lower organisms. This ability is only limited to lower organisms, like Hydra and Planaria. But not in higher organisms like a lizard or a human. But not in higher organisms like a lizard or a human. Hence, it is not considered a true mode of reproduction. Okay. Is it clear, everyone? Is it understood? Sarah, Nida, and Aisha?
Yes.
Yes. Perfect. So write it down for you, not a true mode. Okay. Now there's one question. There's another question that comes up, and let's discuss that also. You see that I have given example of Hydra in multiple modes of asexual reproduction, like budding. It also shows, so Hydra can undergo budding. It also can show fragmentation. If some external factor fragments the Hydra, it can grow from there also, and it can make its copies and reproduce. And Hydra also has the ability to regenerate. Of course, that is what it is doing in fragmentation as well. But among the three modes, you know that reproduction is, out of the context for higher organisms, but still holds true for Hydra. So the question is, among budding, fragmentation, and regeneration, which is the most preferred and natural way of reproduction for a Hydra? What will you choose on the basis of logic?
Fragmentation.
Fragmentation.
Why fragmentation, Sarah? I'll come back to Aisha also for her justification. Why do you think fragmentation, Sarah?
Because it multiplies and it does not change.
It multiplies and it did not change. Then why not regeneration? Because
Like it gives
then going through the same logic, why not regeneration then? What is the problem that you are not considering regeneration as the most preferred for Hydra, but you are considering fragmentation? Okay, let me ask you in a different way. When I say which one is more preferred and natural, you have to think from the perspective of a Hydra. A more preferred reproductive way is that which ensures reproduction all the time. So whenever an organism wants to reproduce, reproduction does not happen without the will of organism. Is it correct? Do you understand it, Sarah?
yes.
It's a conscious active process where the organisms commits to this act where it has to make its copies, right? Whether it is in bacteria, which is fission, or it is in Hydra, which is budding, regeneration, and fragmentation. Remember, I told you. Let's go to Aisha first. Aisha also answered fragmentation. Aisha, why do you think it's fragmentation?
Because in fragmentation, like without being cutted or something, they divide or multiply and develop in, and each fragments they develop into a new organism. And regeneration, it's like if unless they are cut or something like that, then only they can form a new organism. And it's not what to say.
It's interesting.
I have read somewhere like not every time it's possible. Like some hydras are so weak to regenerate again. I read something.
Yes, that depends because regeneration requires lots and lots of energy. So a hydra which is deprived of food and nutrition will not be able to regenerate and will die upon an injury. So both of all three of you, do you understand that whenever we cut an organism or whenever any organism gets cut, and if it's a multicellular organism, there is a concept of wound, right? We are actually inflicting an open wound in that organism. Is it correct? Whether it's a lizard, a human. Yes. So the first thing that has to happen is healing the wound and then starting from that point, regenerating back what was lost. And all of this process requires lots and lots of energy. So yes, but we are not talking about a depleted, nutritionally depleted hydra or something like that. But I really liked your answer. You thought it through for regeneration, but not fragmentation. Remember, I told you that even in fragmentation, hydra cannot fragment itself by will, right, Sarah and Asha?
Correct.
So only Spirogyra shows this capability where they can fragment at will. So if this question was for Spirogyra, you could have said fragmentation because that's a more preferred way. It can just fragment itself and make multiple copies in one go. Sorted, simple, from one Spirogyra, you got 10 and 20 copies. It's a very good mode of reproduction. But for Hydra specifically, it's not fragmentation or regeneration because both requires an external factor on which it depends to get cut first into pieces. Do you understand? All three of you?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So which is the only mode in which a hydra by will can commit to the act of reproduction and produce its copies whenever it wants?
Fragmentation.
No, it's budding.
Oh yeah, I'm sorry.
Were you thinking budding and you said fragmentation? It's only budding. In a budding, the bud, when it's as an outgrowth, when it starts developing, that whole process of sustaining a bud, providing it nutrition, allowing it to grow on your body, and then taking care of it, and when it is mature, getting it detached from yourself, is all under the parent hydra's control. Yes or no, Sarah?
Yes.
You understood why budding is the more natural and preferred mode of reproduction in hydra and not fragmentation or regeneration? Can you both write down the answer? Write down the question from my side. Which among the three, budding, fragmentation, or regeneration, is a more preferred and naturally occurring mode of reproduction, asexual reproduction in hydra? Can you both write down the answer? Can I trust you with this question as an take-home assignment? Say yes or no?
Yes.
Yes, Sarah, Nida?
Yes.
Yes. So you have to write the answer yourself. Okay? You understood the answer, right? You have to just write it. Sarah, you're there? You understood?
Yes.
Okay. Now, moving ahead from regeneration, because that's there now. The fourth mode that we'll be studying is spore formation. You all know from your junior classes what is a spore. Remember what is a spore? Who will tell me? What do we mean by a spore? Is spore a seed? So there are certain words called spore, seeds. Anyone who understands what is a spore? Aisha, if you're speaking something, you're not audible. I can see that you are unmuted, but you're not audible. Where have you heard the word spore before in junior classes? Class 11th, you remember 5 kingdom classification? So you have to discuss, okay? This is not going to be a monologue. If it's not going into your head, I'm just not going to speak it for the sake of speaking. Class 11th, biological classification, where you studied the kingdom fungi. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes. So in a fungi, you must have known that fungi have these bag-like structures, and then they have a hyphae. You know, I'm just making a structure of a. This is house, and they are on a substrate. They have these root-like structures also, which connects, right? So what are these structures called? Spore sac, right? Hyphae. Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
So they, when this bursts as a structure, you see that a lot of spores comes out from these spore sacs and they disperse in the atmosphere, right? So they are spores. Let's do a thought experiment, okay? You might have read about this, or if you have not read about this, still you can do this thought experiment. So you have to take 2 bread pieces. You have to keep one bread in the refrigerator where it's cool, and you have to keep the other bread piece somewhere in the kitchen. You clean the surface, wipe the kitchen clean, and the place where you are keeping it on a utensil or anything, keep it in a clean place. But still over time, you will see that in a week, around a week or so, the bread which is in the kitchen, you will see that some slimy substance starts forming on it, right? Yes or no? Sarah, can you imagine this happen?
Yes.
So what happens? What happens to the bread which is kept in the kitchen, which does not happen to the bread which is kept in the refrigerator? What is happening? What grows on that bread? The whitish layer, or sometimes it's greenish also. What is growing on it?
Fungi.
Fungi, right? So fungus, so fungi grows on the bread. You know that. But where did that fungi came from? Was it already present inside the bread?
Yes.
And why didn't fungi grew in the bread which was kept in refrigerator? Were you eating like the fungus throughout? So whenever you are eating a bread, are you eating the fungus?
Yeah.
Yes?
Probably.
No, think about it.
Yeast is so we are eating, right?
What are you eating? Fungus?
No.
So I was like, yes.
Yeast.
So my question is, was the bread always having that fungi in it? And if that is the case,
Yes, but it grew because of the moisture
so you just
that was trapped inside the bag.
yes. So but you will see till the time you do not open the packet of the bread, you can keep it on the shelf even if you are not keeping it in the refrigerator. Breads can be kept out as well, but they do not develop fungus till they are in the packaging, and if that packaging is airtight. So what's happening basically is that they are not developing from somewhere already. It's possible that some spores are already present in the bread when you bought it. Okay. But there are spores always around us in the surroundings. You know, fungi as an organism in class 11th, you must have read this term about them. They are called cosmopolitan. They are cosmopolitan organisms. What does it mean by cosmopolitan? Any idea? They can survive and grow anywhere where they find just humidity, moisture, and the right temperature. So fungi are present almost everywhere where there is other life forms present. So they are very you say opportunistic organisms. The moment they get an opportunity to grow, they grow out of thin air. And we always wonder, where did that they came from? And not only on bread, even on rotis or chapatis. If you keep a chapati in the same experiment, if you replace bread with chapati, you will see that that roti also got fungus after some time, right? Now roti was properly cooked on the tawa. So even if there's no chance that it was having fungi the moment it came out of the tawa. But what is present everywhere are these spores. So even right now around you, when you are breathing the air, that if it is not purified through a air purifier, it may have been containing lots of spores. And these spores only develop when they find the right environment. Okay. So spore formation is a very successful way to reproduce asexually by many organisms. You understand, everyone?
Yes.
So the bread was not having fungi all the like right from the beginning. Spores grew and made that fungi come. Now write down, mostly spores are mostly unicellular structures that can survive unfavorable conditions, that can survive unfavorable conditions and stay silent and stay silent. But the moment they encounter favorable conditions, but the moment they encounter favorable conditions, they grow into a new organism. They grow into a new organism. Is it clear, Aisha?
Yes, sir.
So spore formation takes place in lower fungi. You can write down spore formation. So this spore sac is also called as sporangium. Okay, because they make spores.
Sir, can you please repeat again from spore formation?
Just one moment. Let Sarah join back, then I'll repeat so that she can also write. Am I audible to you, Sarah?
Yes, sorry, I got disconnected.
Yes, okay. So I'll repeat spore formation for you. Write down. Spores are mostly unicellular structures that can survive unfavorable conditions and stay silent or without growing but the moment they encounter favorable conditions you can write down in brackets optimum pH, temperature, humidity, etc. That that these are the parameters. But the moment they encounter favorable conditions, they grow into a new organism. They grow into a new organism. And when you just got disconnected, Sarah, I just told that the spore sac is also known as sporangium because it's makes spores. Okay, this structure is called sporangium. So they can germinate just like seeds. You see that? Do you see the similarity? A seed also stays dormant when the conditions are unfavorable, right? But the moment they get moisture and a favorable condition, like right temperature, right pH, they start germinating. Am I correct? There is a phase of dormancy.
Yes.
Yes, and then there is a phase of germination. Same happens with spores, but the difference here is that spores are unicellular mostly, whereas seeds are multicellular, right? Yes. And
Yes.
yes. So you can write down this difference between spore and seeds because this has been asked in school examinations. What is the similarities and dissimilarities between spores and seeds? The similarity is both can stay dormant under unfavorable conditions and can germinate under favorable conditions to give rise to new organism. To give rise to new organism. But the difference is spores are unicellular and seeds are multicellular. That is the difference. Another difference is that spores are a product of asexual reproduction, whereas seeds are a product of sexual reproduction in plants. Okay? Understood? Shall I move forward? Written?
Yes.
Yes. Now about the seed part. Okay, you can write this. No, there's no problem. But I'll tell you that there is one exception. You can also make, like I said in the beginning, there are some plants that make seeds without sexual reproduction. Okay, but that is an exception, and we'll study about that later. But till now, is spore formation clear to you? You can write down examples. It happens in fungi. And algae. Fungi and algae. Now, let's talk about certain spores. Write down types of spores that you have to know for entrances. Like there are many more types, but the more common one, the more popular ones we will study. Types of spores. First one is known as zoospores. What does the word zoo means? Again, terminology, okay? You have to understand biology by understanding the words. Zoo, what does the word zoo means? Zoology or zoological parks.
About study about humans and animals.
Humans and mammals.
Animals.
Animals, yes. I thought, why are you being so specific? Yes, zoo means animals. Zoology means study of animal kingdom. That's zoology, which is a branch of biology. So zoo means animals and spores are spores. So these spores are called zoospores because they behave like animal. And what is the major characteristic of an animal that is not present in a plant?
They move.
They move. Perfect. So you can write down zoospores are motile. So they are motile spores. That's why they are called zoospores. Is it clear, Sarah and Nida?
Yes.
Now tell me, I told you that most of the spores are unicellular structures. So if this zoospore is also unicellular, what is the way by which a single cell can move on its own? About that also you have heard, you have read things in biology. If you want a single cell to move, what would you like to do to that cell? What that cell should have? Yes, Nida. If a spore has to move on its own, it cannot have appendages, right? Legs and hands, right? What it can have? Do bacteria move on their own? Sarah, you know about any motile bacteria that moves on its own?
No, but I think they exist.
Yes, they do exist. But if a single cell has to move, can you think of any structure that can help them in moving? Have you read of this one thing called flagella?
Is it the tiny tentacles on the outer surface?
Those are cilia. So there's something called a big single flagella like this, which is present at the tip, one end of the bacteria. And when it vigorously starts moving like this in a whiplash motion, so when it vigorously starts moving like this, the bacteria gets a propelling movement towards the opposite side. You understand? So they use the flagella to move around. And what you are talking about are these small hair-like structures, right? They are called cilia. So the difference between cilia and flagella is, like, first is their anatomical structure, how are they made, and the other difference is cilia are numerous and are smaller, present on the surface. Flagella mostly are one or two in a cell. So zoospores contains flagella. You can write down. They contain flagella for their movement. Now the next point about zoospores is, first is they are motile, they contain flagella. Next is they lack a cell wall. They lack a cell wall. Now, can anyone think of a rational logic behind lacking a cell wall? Do plants have a cell wall?
Yes. Plants have a cell wall, but
Yes.
animal cells don't.
Yes. Animal cells do not have the cell wall. Why do animal cells do not have the cell wall? What does cell wall do? To answer that, let me ask you that. What does a cell wall do? What is the function of the cell wall? What does the wall of your house do?
It
Protects what's
the-
inside of it.
am I
Protects the nucleus and the other organisms.
Exactly. Protection. So wall is for protection wherever it is. And that's the basic logic in biology as well. If you have a wall, you have that wall for protection or for segregation. Do not allow what is outside to interact with what is inside without permission. So that's what a cell wall is for. No one can enter your house if you have walls in your house. If you just have 4 pillars with a roof, everyone can technically like come in and out of your house, right? So cell wall is for protection, whether it is in plant cell, whether it is in fungi, or in bacterial cell. And about cell wall, let me tell you this thing because it's a very, very common question. So class 11th, just a little bit of revision. In class 11th, you have studied about cell walls. So there are 3 kingdoms that have cell wall: Monera, fungi, and plantae. You know that? Out of 5, 3 kingdoms have cell wall. So Monera means bacteria, right? So what is the cell wall of a bacteria made up of? Are all these cell walls same?
No.
No. So what is the difference? What is a bacterial cell made up of? It's made up of peptidoglycan. Okay. What is a plant cell wall made up of? Plant cell wall. What is it made up of? Idea? It's made up of cellulose. Someone just wrote. Nida wrote cellulose. Right. Correct, Nida. And what is a fungi cell wall made up of? It's made up of chitin. Remember? Chitin is the same biological polymer with which the exoskeleton of insects is made up of, like cockroach. The exoskeleton of cockroaches are made up of chitin, and the cell wall of fungi is also made up of chitin. So there are 3 different biological polymers with which 3 different cell walls of 3 different kingdoms are made mostly. So it clearly tells that cell wall, the evolution of cell wall was for protection, and whichever organism, whatever it could find that they could incorporate in their body to make a layering or a covering, they did that. But cell membrane in all organisms is made up of lipids and proteins. Is it clear?
Yes.
And if cell membrane, mostly the cell membrane is bilayered, so it's called a lipid bilayer. Have you heard of this term, lipid bilayer, for cell membrane, with some proteins embedded in that bilayer? So lipids make the cell membrane for all. Okay. Now coming to this zoospores, they lack a cell wall because they can move. Cell wall is for protection, and if you can move away, that's the reason why animals also have evolved without cell wall. Because if we have to protect ourselves, to protect anything, there are 2 ways. What are the 2 ways? Either you get a shield, a covering, and whatever you are protecting yourself against, that cannot penetrate that shield and reach to you. Okay, it's like wear a bulletproof jacket or dodge the bullet. Is it clear?
Yes.
So if you can move away from danger. Like an animal, if the animal senses a danger, it can run away from it, move away from it. So it does not require cell wall for protection in evolutionary context. So zoospores also do not have cell wall. Will you remember this? No need to mug it up, right? The examples are important. If you have to make a question difficult, ask examples, because these are some things you have to remember. So you can only remember the most common ones, but discuss them so that they stay in your memory. For example, zoospores are in Chlamydomonas. This one organism is in your NCRT. Chlamydomonas. It makes zoospores. Okay. And Chlamydomonas is an algae. Okay. And fungus example is albugo. Albugo is a fungus. Both of them produce zoospores. Is it clear? The second is exactly opposite to zoospores, and it is called a Plano Spores. So a Plano Spores, write down, they are non-motile. They are non-motile, so they cannot move. So basically they do not have flagella. So if they are non-motile and if they cannot move, they lack flagella. They do not have a flagella. So what will they be having? They have a cell wall. Simple logic, right? You cannot move, get a shield. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Now examples of this are not asked, have not been asked, but you should know regardless. One is Walkeria and the other is Hematococcus. Okay, Walkeria and Hematococcus. I like to check. I think both of them are algae, as far as I know. Lower algae. You can check. Is it clear? All three of you? Shall I move forward?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So spore formation is clear, which is another mode of asexual reproduction. So this is mostly what you have to study about the lower organisms, the fundamentals of asexual reproduction in lower organisms. Now, asexual reproduction also happens in higher organisms, and when we talk about higher organisms, I'm mostly talking about plants first. So in plants, if I when plants undergo asexual mode of reproduction, we call it vegetative propagation. Okay, is it clear? And you have read about vegetative propagation in your junior classes, especially the artificial ways that humans use to propagate a plant of our interest and a plant which is beneficial to us. So can you think of different ways of vegetative propagation that you have already studied? Let's discuss that first. What do you know about vegetative propagation, which is an asexual mode of reproduction in higher organisms, which is plants? Yes, tell me. What is vegetative propagation? Let's start with the question. What is it? Any idea? If you have no idea, go to the words vegetative and propagation. Propagative. What does the word propagation means? Even if you don't know about vegetative, what does the word propagate, to propagate or propagation means? It's a simple English word, right? Sarah, you've heard this word before, propagation?
I've heard it, but I don't know its meaning.
So let me give you a sentence. So I'm giving you a message that you have to propagate among the masses. What does this sentence implies? Do you understand what I'm asking you to do? Sarah? I'm asking you to propagate a message forward, further to the masses, which means propagation or propagate means to spread, right? Is it clear?
Yes.
Yes. And the word vegetative is used for those structures in a living system which are not associated with reproductive structures. So they are not reproductive. They are the normal body parts like hands, legs in an animal, like a nose, ear in an animal. In plants, the vegetative structures are stem, leaves, roots, and branches. Is it clear? So all these parts are
Yes.
vegetative parts. If we talk about the other sexual parts or the regenerative parts, they are flowers. In plant, they are flowers and fruits. In animals, they are gonads, the testes and ovaries. Okay, is it clear? So do you understand both the terms now, vegetative and propagation?
Yes.
So write down, you can write down for vegetative. Let's write down what does vegetative propagation means. Write down. It is an asexual method. It is an asexual method of plant reproduction. Of plant reproduction, where a plant propagates through where a plant propagates or make copies of itself, propagates or make copies of itself through its vegetative structures, through its vegetative structures, like leaves, stem, and roots. Leaves, stem, and roots. Specifically these three structures, not the flowers, not the fruits, not the bud or anything else. Okay?
Yes.
And when we talk about asexual mode, see, the basic biology stays the same. We are just studying it separately because these are higher organisms. They are multicellular and the most evolved, one of the most evolved organisms like plants. So we are calling it vegetative propagation. But basically, when we go to the fundamentals of biology, what is happening is similar to what was happening in lower organisms. Okay, so you can write down vegetative propagation occurs through vegetative propagation occurs through fragmentation and regeneration. Fragmentation and regeneration of specific vegetative parts. And now you know what are the vegetative parts, right? Leaves, stem, and roots. Is it clear? All three of you?
Yes.
So what's happening basically is the same thing. You have to fragment some vegetative part and allow it to regenerate, and a new plant will be formed. So no sexual reproduction, no fusion of gametes, no pollination, nothing happened, no fruit formation. You just made a new plant from a non-regenerative part or from a vegetative part. Just like in a hydra, you were breaking down the hydra and then the hydra, every fragment was developing into a new hydra, correct? Here also, plants cannot like fragment themselves, correct? On their own, they cannot just break themselves into two. Am I right or not? Aisha. Yes, correct.
Yes, sir.
So what can plants do if they cannot fragment? But we can fragment plants, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So there are two types of vegetative propagation. In your junior classes, what I'm sure of is that you must have read about the one type, which is the artificial. So mostly we study about the artificial mode. But write down, vegetative propagation is of two types. Vegetative propagation is of two types. Any idea what are those two types? The natural vegetative propagation and the artificial one. Okay. Now, what do we mean by natural? Natural is, just write down, natural vegetative propagation occurs. Natural vegetative propagation occurs when the plant grows and develops. When the plant grows and develops, naturally without any human interference. Naturally without any human interference. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So that is the natural mode. An artificial mode, just write down that also. Let's define that also here. An artificial mode. Simple. Can you write it yourself? This is carried out by humans.
Yes.
Yes, tell me, Aisha.
In artificial vegetation, it occurs and grows and develops with the interference of humans.
Yes, perfect. So write down artificial vegetative propagation. It is carried out by humans in controlled, in a controlled manner, in a controlled manner, in fields or in laboratories. In the fields or in laboratories. Okay, is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Write it down here for you. Sarah has again rejoined. I think she's having some network issues. Am I audible to you, Sarah?
Yes.
Yeah, I reckon you are having some network issues, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I was just telling that vegetative propagation, that you heard about vegetative propagation and the part that it occurs through fragmentation and regeneration only, right?
Yes.
I just told that vegetative propagation is of two types. The natural one, which is where the plant grows and develops naturally without any human interference. And the artificial one, which Aisha answered that it is carried out by humans and in the fields or in the laboratories. Okay, so these are the two types of vegetative propagation, and we have to study both the types in detail for entrance point of view. Okay, so let me give you a brief outline. In the natural mode, so we'll not be able to finish it today, so we'll take up this in detail in the next class, but I'm giving you this as an assignment, homework assignment that you have to do. You do not have to submit this, but write down in class homework. So I will be giving certain things in every class that you have to go back and read before you come back on Thursday. So you have to read this. In natural mode, basically a natural mode is nothing but the plant without any human interference, if it can propagate with the vegetative parts. Now those vegetative parts have to be either leaves, so through leaves, through stems, through roots, and also through bulbs. So these are the four things that we will be covering in natural mode. So you have to go and study these four things, and most importantly you have to focus on the examples, okay, of each. Will you do this, everyone? All three of you?
Yes.
And then in the artificial mode, this you have already studied in your junior classes, where they teach you about cutting, remember? Cutting, grafting, layering.
Yes, sir.
So this you have studied, right? Cutting, grafting, layering. And what else is there? There's one more thing that we'll study in detail, that's called tissue culture. For these three also, you have to go read with examples of each, and tissue culture we'll do in detail. Even if you do not read it, it's fine, but if you read it, it's good. So you understood? This is your in-class assignment for today. Clear? Write this down. And I want everyone with their own self-made notes, whatever it is, 1, 2, 3 bullets, it's okay. You have to come prepared to discuss in the next class. So probably half of the time in the next class we'll focus on this natural and artificial mode, and then we'll go to tissue culture. So all this from here to here happens in fields. You can do all this in the fields, but this happens in laboratory. You require a laboratory setup to do tissue culture. Okay, is it clear? How is this segregated? Sarah, Aisha, and Nida, clear to you?
Yes.
Any
Sir, but
doubts?
Can I ask you one thing?
Yes,
Like,
please.
I guess is tissue culture like in some I have heard like in some small plants they grow without the help of natural sunlight, like in the normal bulb lights and all.
Yes.
So is it connected with that?
Yes, that you may not need to do. Very good question actually. So I think everyone understood what Aisha is asking. Let me just elaborate her question. She is asking that we have learned that sunlight is important for plant germination and growth, right? But when we develop plants artificially, we do it inside buildings with the help of specialized bulbs. So they are not sunlight, but they can grow and develop under the bulb, the light, artificial electronic light as well. So it's a good question, and we have to understand for this that what is present inside the sunlight. What is in the sunlight? You know, sunlight is a spectrum. It has visible spectrum from violet to red. Vibgyor. Remember studying Vibgyor?
Yes, sir.
Yes. We
Indigo,
studied that in
blue.
10th.
Yes, green, yellow, orange, red, right? If you go before this, it is called ultraviolet range, and if you go beyond red, it is called infrared, right? So we cannot see ultraviolet, we also cannot see infrared. We can see Vibgyor, right? And it is associated with chlorophyll. You know, plants have chlorophyll. Why do plants need sunlight? Because they trap the light energy and harvest that energy to for the process of photosynthesis, right? And most of the energy that they are harvesting comes from comes from this region, okay, which is blue, green, yellow, orange mostly. So if you can artificially make a light source which emits the light of the wavelength of this equivalent wavelength, it is sufficient to provide energy to the plants to do photosynthesis. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you understand, Sarah?
Yes.
So this is how we can grow plants without sunlight, and because they need just the proper amount or the specific wavelength of the spectrum in which they can photosynthesize. So if we can provide that, they can be grown without sunlight. Now it may or may not have to be linked with tissue culture, because you can just take a plant which is germinating from the seed and you can make it grow under artificial light. You can also grow a plant through tissue culture, and then you can also make it develop under the artificial light. Is it clear, Aisha?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So good question, and keep bringing questions like this. It's interesting thing. So this is where I end today's class, everyone, and keep revising. I'll see you on Thursday, all three of you. Come prepared, okay? Any question, any doubts if you want to ask me? Sarah,